everyone, this is Cindy, the author of some horror gothic mashups, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. I hope you enjoy this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up to let me know so I know what kind of content you guys are looking for. I think I got about 10 books read this month, although 2 of them were manga, so I don't know if I'd classify them as books, but, well, and 1 graphic novel, actually. So that's the only reason I was able to read so much, is because some of them were very short. But either way, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the 2 ARC copies that I received from NetGalley. The first one was The Killer House Party. This is a YA horror novel, and I thought this was a slasher when I requested it, but it's actually not. It's a haunted house book, which was great because haunted house is actually my favorite, so that was pretty cool. So this kind of reminded me a lot of an anthology that I read last December. I can't remember what it's called, but basically you went to this haunted mansion and every story was told from a different room of that mansion. So you'd have like the dining room or the library or the kitchen or, you know, the attic or whatever, and then there would be a ghost story attached to that specific room in this anthology, which was a lot of fun. And this book kind of read that way a little bit. We had our main character, and she and her friends planned this graduation party at this house that nobody actually thinks was haunted, but it was like a murder house, you know, because this family got killed there. And there's been a lot of local legends about it growing up in this little town, you know, about the creepy abandoned house at the top of the hill. And so her parents are both real estate agents, and they bought this house. And she's pretty mad about it because the money that was used to purchase this house was supposed to be her college tuition. And so now she has to go to like a community college. And she had her heart set on going Ivy League, and so she's pretty mad and upset. So she decides she's going to have this big party at this house this as her last hurrah and let the local people that have always been curious about this house be able to enter this house. She's going to have a paid admission to this party, and she knows that they'll pay it because this is a bunch of rich people that she's invited. Most of her classmates are rich, and so she's getting like $5,000 a ticket or something to come to this party. And so the part that reminds me of the anthology is they get trapped in this house, but it kind of reads the same way, where it's like some of her classmates are trapped in the ballroom and forced to dance or whatever. And then like some of their class members would be stuck in the kitchen, or some of her classmates are stuck other parts of the house, and different things happen according to where those classmates were at the time. And so her and her friends, they end up just wandering the halls, watching as chaos ensues throughout this house and trying not to get literally sucked into the walls. So it was pretty fun and interesting. It got a little bit ridiculous at times, like a little bit silly, but I think it was meant to, so it didn't bother me as much. I don't like it if it's supposed to be serious and then it's just comes across as silly. I don't like that. But if I know it's supposed to be a little bit humorous, then I don't mind as much. And I could tell that it wasn't taking itself too seriously. It was meant to be kind of fun and humorous. So that didn't really bother me. One thing I will say though is the author like really wanted you to know that none of these characters were white. And I don't have any problem with that. I like having other diverse representation in my books. I'm all for that. But my issue is it came across very forced and very like in your face. It's like she took every opportunity imaginable to remind you, hey, guess what? Our main character's black. Hey, guess what? Her best friend's Mexican, or whatever, you know, like, and I don't know. It just came across as a little bit like, okay, yeah, I get it, you know, but the author just wanted to like beat you over the head with it. So that was kind of strange, but it is what it is. But overall, I thought this was an enjoyable, quick read, and I would give it 4 stars. And then the next one I read was I'll Be Waiting by Kelly Armstrong. And this is an adult horror novel, and this is like a seance type ghost story book. So I'm really interested in that. I really like books that have seances in them quite a bit. And so this is about a woman who unfortunately has CF, which is cystic fibrosis, and she knows she's not going to live to Well, she lives to adulthood, but she doesn't think she's gonna live very much past that. But surprisingly, she does, and so she allows herself to fall in love and get married, and she's on her honeymoon, and they get into a car accident, and she actually loses her husband, what she finds extremely unfair because she was the one that was supposed to eventually die and not have very many years left, and he was supposed to be the one that lived. And so she's understandably heartbroken about this. And so the rest of the book is about her trying to contact her husband through these seances. And she knows that most of them are just fake, you know, and she's usually able to figure out how she's being duped and all that. And her friends and family kind of do an intervention where they're like, you need to stop. You know, you're driving yourself crazy trying to contact your husband. Most of the time, it's not even real. Like, just let it go. And so she agrees to do just one more seance and do everything she can to prove that it's real or not. And if it ends up being a dead end again, then she'll officially be done doing these seances. So she picks out the most professional, most, you know, upheld guy ever to perform this one last seance. And they go to her vacation home that she used to go to with her husband. And it's not haunted. There's no history of violence or anything at that house. And so she thinks it's a good neutral location because there's no way that other legends are going to get in the way. So if something like ghostly happens, then it would probably be her husband. So she goes to this house and they kind of get trapped there because there's a bunch of bugs. So if you're a little bit squeamish about bugs, then you might want to skip those parts or maybe skip this book altogether. But there is a lot of bug talk and they kind of help trap them in this house because there's just so many of them and it's pretty gross at times. But anyway, so they're trapped at this house and of course creepy things start to happen and she's trying to figure out if it truly is her husband or if she let something darker in while performing this seance and that it's not actually her husband, but something evil and demonic. So I thought this was a really fun read. I really enjoyed it. I will say it got a little bit gorier and had a lot more body horror than I was anticipating, which isn't a bad thing. And it wasn't like over the top to where I don't feel like I could handle it. But I was just a little bit surprised. Like I didn't expect it to be as gory as it ended up being. So I don't know, that was kind of a fun surprise. So I did enjoy this one quite a bit. I would give it 4 stars. And then I finished Blood on the Tracks. I had already read up to volume 12. And then I still had 13 to 17 to go. So I read the rest of the series and I feel conflicted about it. So I was told, or heard rather, that the first like 12 volumes is like a prequel to this series. And so I was like, really? Wow, because, you know, it goes to some crazy places and that's so involved. And, you know, it's 12 volumes. So I'm like, that's quite a prequel, you know. And so I didn't expect volume 17 to be the last volume. So if that's the case, you know, the real story is only 5 volumes long. And I'm like, okay. So for people that have been told that the first 12 volumes is a prequel, I think that's a lie. I don't think it's a prequel. I think it's a huge part of the story. It pretty much is the story. And then you're just concluding it like years later when he's an adult. Because I think that's why people thought it was the prequel, because he's like 11 or 13 or something. But then all of a sudden he's a grown man. He's like in his 30s or something. So I think that's why people thought it was a prequel, but it's not. It's not a prequel. It's just like a conclusion to the story. But there's one aspect that really confused me about these volumes, but I can't speak to it because it would be a major spoiler. So if you have finished this series, please DM me and we can talk because I want to know your thoughts because I'm so confused. And I don't know how I feel about the ending. I think it was a disservice that I didn't know it was the last volume. I assumed I had like 10 more volumes to go. And so when it all of a sudden is like, bam, over, end of the story, I'm just like, what? Like it just seemed very abrupt, you know, and very just like, well, that's it. Like, I don't know. I wasn't completely satisfied. Not to say that it was necessarily a bad ending because it wasn't, but at the same time, it just didn't feel all that satisfying. Like, I don't know. I wanted more. Like, I wanted more to the relationship with him and his mom as an adult. And I don't know. It just was too short. It was just not enough. And it just felt a little bit unsatisfactory. So that was a shame. The other manga that I read was the 12th volume of Spy Family, and this one I was a lot more satisfied with. I really enjoyed this one. I really love this series. It's so good. And volume 11 was like one of the best in the series so far, so I was very excited to get this one. And it was fun. Like the first little bit was like two like little short stories almost that weren't like really part of the main storyline. They were just almost thrown in seemingly, but they were fun. And then we get back into the story, and I really enjoyed it. I really like this, but I can't really say that much about it because it is the 12th volume. But if you enjoy this series as much as I do, then this continues to be good. And then for my in-person book club, the pick was The Amulet of Samarkand. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And my local library actually didn't have a copy of the novel, but they did have the graphic novel. And so I ended up getting that instead. So I might have missed like a few details and stuff, but I never felt lost during the discussion. And everything they said was in there. So I don't feel like I missed anything. And I'm actually extremely, extremely relieved that I got the graphic novel because I don't think I could have made it through the actual book. I think I would have DNF'd it because it wasn't bad. It wasn't badly written. It's not a bad story, but I don't know. I'm just not really into fantasy so much as I used to be. And I believe this is middle grade, and it seems a little bit more geared towards like boys, I would say. Like, not to be like sexist or whatever, you could like whatever you want, but it had a lot of like action scenes, and I don't know, there was only like two, well, I guess three women in the whole story, and one of them was there for a very specific reason that I can't say because it's a spoiler. And then one was hardly there. And then you had Kitty, who was like a street urchin or something. And I think that she'll be more in it in further books. But as far as this books, there wasn't really a whole lot of women in it, and it was just a lot of action scenes, and so it just seemed geared more towards boys, which is fine, but it just wasn't really my cup of tea. This is about a society where if you're a magician, then you're like the high class. You're part of the government, you're the people that make the rules, you're the rich, and everybody else is considered commoners, the ones that are normal or whatever. And so these magicians are able to summon genies and jinns and demons and different entities like that, and that's how they use their magic. And so our main character is an apprentice, and he starts doing magic that he shouldn't know how to do yet, but he's very smart and very skilled, and he researched a lot and he studied a lot and got better than what his master thought he could do. And he summons a demon called Bartimus. And so he gets Bartimus to help him in this revenge plot that he has against this other magician called Simon Lovelace, because he kind of made fun of him, slapped him around a bit, like, oh, you're just a stupid kid, you don't know what you're talking about. And so he got mad and summoned Bartimus to steal this amulet of Samarkand from him, not realizing what a big deal this amulet is. Like I said, it wasn't a bad book. I just don't think it was a book for me specifically. But I think there's definitely an audience out there for it. I'm just not it. I will, however, say that I do love the author. I read The Screaming Staircase, which is part of the Lockwood & Co. series, and I really love that series. I've only read the first 3 books, so I have like 2 more books in the series to go. But I really enjoyed that one a lot. It was really good. But that one's a little bit more up my alley because, it is fantastical in a sense, but it's more like ghosts and hauntings and paranormal stuff, and that's more what I'm into. And so I really liked that series by this author. So if you're like me and you didn't really like this one, maybe try Lockwood & Co. So unfortunately, I'm going to give this one a 2.5, which is just straight down the middle, you know, just kind of meh. And then I also read The Return by Rachel Harrison, and this is the last Rachel Harrison book I needed to read. Although I do want to read Bad Dolls, which is technically like 4 novellas in one book, so it's like a short story collection. But as far as actual novels go, this is the last Rachel Harrison book I had to read, which is funny because it's actually her debut. But I just love the pink. I love horror books that are pink. But anyways, if you liked My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix, I think you'll really like this one, because they've definitely had those similar vibes to it, where you had like a group of female friends and one of their friends starts acting a little bit weird and different, and they're trying to help her. Because in this case, there's this group of 4 girls, and they go to this hotel for like a girls' getaway type thing, because one of their friends went missing and was presumed dead, and they even had a funeral for her. But then 2 years later, she shows up, and ta-da, I'm alive. So, you know, they're obviously ecstatic, and they want to spend time with her, so they go on this trip together to this hotel. And I love the descriptions of the hotel in this book. I think it was really fun. That it was one of those hotels where every room was like a theme, you know, like jungle theme, or the red room, or the Edgar Allan Poe room, or the Victorian room, or whatever, you know. And so it was just really fun to see the different rooms in this hotel. And it got pretty, not gory, but pretty gruesome in the end, like with the descriptions and stuff, which was really fun and interesting. And I really enjoyed this one. I will say, though, that this actually says the F word a lot, and I'm someone that doesn't really like the F word. I'm kind of old school that way. And normally I can just like, my eyes will just like flip past it and just like not really see it. But when it's said excessively, then I start to notice, and I'm like, okay, can we choose like a different word? So especially towards the latter half, when stuff starts popping off, you know, and the horror starts coming more into it, which is understandable because they're freaking out, but I just don't happen to like that. I just wanted you guys to be aware of that if you're like me. And then the chapters are very, very long, and I got to the point where I got used to shorter chapters, because I read a lot of thrillers, and most thrillers will have shorter chapters. And so I got used to those short chapters. And so when I come across a book where the chapter's like 25, 30 pages long, I'm just like, wow, okay. Like, I think this whole book only has like 7 chapters or something. So that was a little bit annoying at times, because I'm someone that can't stop reading in the middle of a chapter. I have to finish the chapter, or I get annoyed, like I get OCD about it. And so, you know, I get busy and I can't always sit down and read 30 pages right then. And so the fact that I had to keep stopping in the middle of a chapter was kind of annoying. But I mean, it's not like it's terrible, but it just bothers me sometimes. So I prefer shorter chapters. But all in all, this is a good one. 4 stars. And I read I Need You to Read This by Jessa Maxwell. And I kind of have an unpopular opinion, because I actually enjoyed Golden Spoon, which was this author's debut novel. It wasn't like fantastic, something I would rave about. And I do admit that as a thriller or murder mystery, it didn't really work, because the murder didn't even happen till like the very last third of the book. And so I'm like, can I even really call this a murder mystery? Like, it almost wasn't. But I just really enjoyed the characters. I loved all the baking elements and the reality TV show, and I just really enjoyed the story just as a story. And so I was excited to read something else by this author, and so I picked up her new novel. And I will say I really loved the first half of this book. I thought it was really fun. I was really invested. You know, I really liked the character, I liked the atmosphere, I was intrigued by the mystery. And I won't say it got bad in the last half, but I don't know. I wanted a little bit more. Like, it was just a little bit too predictable. It was a little bit too tame, I guess. I don't know. There was just something about it that wasn't completely satisfactory, but I didn't hate it. It was still a good book. I still enjoyed this, and I'm still giving it 4 stars. But I just didn't happen to enjoy the first half more than the second half, but still a decent read. Oh, I guess I should tell you what this is about. So there's this woman who loved Dear Constance, who was an advice columnist, and she really helped her during some hard times in her life. And so she really loved this columnist, but she was actually murdered. And then her job was up for grabs. And so just on a whim, she's like, well, I'm just going to apply for the job just for the heck of it, just because I love the column. She is a writer, and so she just thought, why not? So of all the hundreds of candidates that are trying to vie for this job, she actually gets it. And so she's super excited, but she's also a little bit nervous because nobody knows why she was murdered. And so she's like, am I getting myself, in the crosshairs of a killer because I'm taking this job? And then she also has a secret in her past that she's trying to run from, and this job could potentially put her in the spotlight and therefore put her in danger in other ways. And so that part was the most predictable part, is exactly what this secret was. But I don't know, I still liked the main character and I still enjoyed the atmosphere, and I do love books about writers and stuff. So for the most part, I really enjoyed this one. I just thought it was a little bit predictable, and the last half was just a little bit mundane and a little bit like typical thriller. But again, like I said, 4 stars, so still a good read. And then for my online book club, which is the You'll Read Too book club, we read Incidents Around the House. And this is my first horror novel by Josh Malerman. I tried to read Daphne and I DNF'd it. Didn't like the writing style, didn't like all the basketball stuff. Thought the dialogue was a little bit like YA, just kind of bothered me, which was a shame because the premise sounded amazing. So I was hesitant, but also excited, especially when I found out it was a Book of the Month Club pick. I was like, oh, this one sounds really good too, but Daphne also sounded good. And then I heard that the way it's written is pretty weird, and it is, but it didn't bother me as much as I thought it was. So I was so relieved by that, because he doesn't have any dialogue tags. Well, he does have dialogue tags, but he doesn't have quotation marks around the dialogue. He just like separates it by paragraphs. So you'd have like a paragraph of her thoughts, and then a paragraph where they're talking, and then he'd separate it and there's another paragraph of her thoughts. So that was a little bit weird, but it actually didn't end up bothering me as much as I thought it would. And then it's also told completely from the point of view of a child, which I actually thought worked really well for this book, because it made it a lot scarier and creepier because it was in her POV. And children don't think the same way that adults do. And so she doesn't realize the gravity of the situation and the fact that she should be terrified of this evil entity, because there's this woman that's hiding in her closet that calls herself Other Mommy. And she comes and talks to her all the time. And at first she thought that this was her friend and she enjoyed her. But then over time, she started to be a little bit afraid. And she started realizing that maybe this isn't something that she should be talking to, because she always asks the question, can I come into your heart? And she always said no, because she doesn't know what would happen to her. Because she asked Other Mommy, do you live in the closet? And she says no. And she's like, okay, well, if I say yes, where am I going to go? Like, what's going to happen to me? And so she decides to try not to talk to her anymore. And she doesn't say yes. She just kind of tries to ignore her. But then one day her real mom sees this evil entity. And so she's, realizing that maybe this wasn't her friend like she thought. This book has some really creepy elements to it. It has some really good creepy scenes to it. And I really, really enjoyed this book a lot. And it's kind of big, but because of the formatting, you just fly through it. And I will say, I don't know about the ending. I'm conflicted about the ending. A part of me thinks it was a good ending and it made sense for the story. But another part of me kind of thought like, well, that was a waste of my time. But I don't know. So I don't know if I like the ending or not. So I guess if you've read this book, leave me a comment letting me know whether you were a fan of the ending or not, because I think that'd be interesting. Even during our book club discussion, there were some people I think that liked the ending and some people didn't. So I always find it interesting to see what people think about it. But I really enjoyed this one. I couldn't give it quite 5 stars, but I would give this 4.5. It was almost 5 stars. And then because it's September and the kids are back in school and it's kind of those fall time school vibes. I just wanted to read some dark academia type books. I don't know if you would classify this as dark academia. Basically just like horror thriller books that take place at a school. So first up we have The Final Grade by R.L. Stine. And I am a huge fan of R.L. Stine, and I love Fear Street. Fear Street is my all-time favorite series from him. When I was in junior high, I just gobbled them up, and it was just so much fun. So I've been having fun going through them as an adult. And I will admit, this one isn't my favorite of his. It was very standard, very typical R.L. Stine, where this girl, gets threatening phone calls a lot. That's like a big trope in a lot of his books. But the phone calls weren't actually threatening. It was like a guy begging to help and please let me help you. And she's just like, leave me alone, like, I don't know, they weren't threatening though. So I thought that was kind of funny, and it just wasn't well written. And most of his aren't, to be honest. Like, they weren't well written. They were just fun. But some of them are better written than others. And this happens to be one that's not as well written. And the main character drove me nuts. She was so annoying. And every guy in this book wanted to be with her. And, oh, I love you. And let's get together. And she's just like, go away. Leave me alone. I have a boyfriend. Like, I don't know. She drove me crazy. And because there was so many guys in this book and they all had like the same personality, I could not keep them straight. I don't know who any of them were. But there was one kill scene that was a pretty good though, I thought. So I enjoyed that part. But yeah, this is very simple plot. You just have this girl named Lily, and she is mad at her teacher because he's the only teacher that wouldn't give her an A. She got a B, and I need to have an A so that I can be valedictorian, and need to have all A's or else my parents are going to be mad at me. But then different creepy things begin to happen, and I don't know. I mean, it was okay. It was fun, but I wouldn't say it's his best. And I hate it when sometimes he uses the characters' names a lot, like Lily said this, and then her friend said, Lily, let's do this, and then Lily went and did that, and then Lily, come do this. And so it was like you're getting the name Lily in the dialogue tags, but you're also getting it actually in the dialogue. And so all you hear is Lily like over and over and over. So you just end up hearing their names like a lot. And so it gets a little bit like, okay, you don't need to say their name that much when you're talking. Most people don't in real life. So that was a little bit annoying. And then the thing about R.L. Stine books, and in particular Fear Street, is they always have these like traumatic things happen to them where they almost get killed, but then like they're like unfazed by it. They're making jokes at the end and they're laughing and ha ha ha, wasn't that funny? Let's go do homework, like, or whatever, like they never are traumatized by what happens to them. They're never affected by it. Which, I mean, it was written for children, so that's probably good, but it's highly unrealistic. I will say, though, that halfway through this book, it took a turn that I wasn't expecting, because I expected it, but the reveal came like halfway through, and I was like, oh, okay, I thought that was going to happen at the very end, not halfway through. So then you get kind of like a blackmail aspect, and so I thought that was fun. So I don't know. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't like my favorite. So probably just give it about 3 stars. And then I read a point horror book called Final Exam by A. Bates. And this one was a lot better written. I mean, there were a few parts that I was like, okay, it was written kind of, I don't know, weird or mediocre, or, it's not like the best written thing I've ever read. But compared to Final Grade, it was a lot better written, and the character development was a lot better. And I really enjoyed the main character. So whereas Final Grade, the main character drove me nuts and was really annoying, and this one, I actually really liked our main character, and I really enjoyed getting to know her. And I thought that the story itself was better plotted and a little bit more interesting, but it definitely had the feel of a Fear Street book, which, a lot of point horror basically do feel like Fear Street. It's kind of funny because it's like oddly refreshing but yet unrealistic, because this teenage girl, the way she talked to adults was, you know, she was very reasonable, she was very honest, she was very forthcoming and upfront, and, you know, she could talk to adults like a normal, reasonable human being, which in a lot of YA books, it's more like angsty and you don't understand me type stuff, you know. So that was refreshing, but in some parts seemed a little bit unrealistic because she came across as like another adult rather than a kid. But at the same time, I mean, she's like our other main character, Lily, in Final Grade, where she's got good grades, she's, you know, comes home at curfew, like she's a good kid. And so I can just kind of see it more because that's how I was when I was a teenager. Like, I didn't talk back to adults, I wasn't like a butthead. I don't know, it was refreshing, and I'm just not used to it from a YA book. So, you know, she would just talk to the principal and to her teachers, and she would explain things, and she would help them, and like it was just kind of refreshing to see that. So, yeah, I enjoyed this one a lot more than I enjoyed Final Grade, so I'd probably give this one 4 stars. And that's it. That's all the books that I read for this month. So please let me know in the comment section below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button, please feel free to do so. If you hit the notification bell, then you won't miss any videos from me. I post every Friday, and I hope to see you in my next one. See ya!